The wind came first, not a soft breeze, not a gentle winter warning. It screamed across the high plains of Wyoming like a wounded thing, thin and sharp, carrying a cold that felt older than the mountains themselves. Snow followed behind it, not falling in quiet flakes, but hitting the ground in hard, stinging pellets that erased the trail and blurred the line between earth and sky. The Wyoming Territory in the 1880s was not a place for the weak, and today it seemed determined to kill anything that dared to stay alive. Beneath the broken frame of an old wagon, half buried on an abandoned mining road, a woman lay curled into the frozen ground. Her name, at least the name she used now, was Clara. She looked more like a bundle of rags than a person. Her dress was torn, stiff with mud and blood. Her bare feet were blue from the cold. A bruise covered her jaw. Fever shook her thin body with every breath. She had been running for days, and running until time itself melted away. When she finally closed her eyes, the world went black. Far across the snow, a tall man moved through the storm as if it barely touched him. His name was Wes. He was the kind of man the mountains shaped for themselves, broad-shouldered, slow-moving, and built for a life that broke most others. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his jaw, pulling the skin tight. His face looked carved from stone, and his silence felt like another kind of weather. But behind him he led a mule loaded with 2 deer, steam rising from the fresh kills. He was headed home, back to the only cabin that tolerated a man like him. He saw the wagon before he saw her. He stopped. The storm hissed around him. Strangers never meant anything good in this country. Strangers meant questions. Strangers meant trouble. And a woman lying half dead in the snow meant the worst kind of trouble. He almost walked on. It would have been the smart thing. And men with guns always followed women running from something. And a woman beaten, branded, and abandoned, that meant men dangerous enough to burn down mountains to find her. But Wes wasn't the kind of man who left even a coyote to die in the cold. He crouched, reached under the wagon, and gently pulled her free. She was frighteningly light. Her breathing was shallow, her skin ice cold. Yet he lifted her onto the mule as if she weighed no more than a sack of feathers and turned toward the cliffs where his hidden cabin waited. The cabin sat tucked between 2 rock walls, sheltered by thick pine trees. It was small, but strong. 1 room, a stone fireplace, a cot, a rough-hewn table. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and pine. The smell of a man who expected nothing and wanted even less. He laid her on his own bed. For a man who had spent 8 years alone, and having a woman in his home felt like an invasion. His hands were clumsy at first as he cut away her frozen dress, careful not to touch more than he had to. He washed her bruised skin with warm water. He bandaged her feet. He dressed her in one of his wool shirts, far too big on her small frame. Then he sat in his chair and watched the fire. He had brought trouble home. He knew it. Hours later, Clara woke with a scream lodged in her throat. Warmth terrified her. Warmth meant walls. Ye walls meant men. She sat up fast, clutching the wool shirt around her. She saw the rifles. She saw the fire. She saw him. Wes did not move. He did not threaten. He only lifted his eyes from the knife he was sharpening. "You're safe from the storm," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel under heavy boots. "Safe?" she whispered, her breath shaking. Don't touch me." "I wasn't planning on it," he replied. He stood, towering over her, but he didn't come close. Yes, he set a tin cup of hot broth on the floor between them and pushed it toward her with his boot. "You're weak," he said simply. "Drink." She hesitated. She waited for the trick, waited for the price. But he didn't look at her again. He just sat back down, sharpening his knife. For the first time in months, no one reached for her. No one shouted. No one grabbed. Slowly, she lifted the cup. She drank. It hurt her empty stomach, but she couldn't stop. For days, Wes fed her, cared for her, and said almost nothing. He kept his distance. He did not ask questions. He did not touch her unless he had to change her bandages. His silence was confusing. Men she knew were loud, greedy, fast with their hands. Wes was none of those things, and that terrified her even more. But the mountains were patient, and so was he. As the storm deepened outside, a fragile truce formed inside that tiny cabin. A truce built from quiet fear and the strange safety of a man who wanted nothing from her. Now, neither of them knew it yet, but this winter storm had tied their lives together, and nothing in the high country would ever be the same. The storm eased, but inside the cabin the tension grew thicker each day. June, though Wes still thought of her as Clara, could finally walk. Her feet healed enough for her to move around, though every step reminded her of the world she had run from. She tried to stay quiet, tried to stay small, but silence had a strange way of pulling old memories to the surface. When she slept, she cried out. When she woke, she looked around the cabin like she expected someone to appear from the shadows. Wes saw all of it. He said little, but nothing escaped him. One night she woke gasping, clutching her chest, shaking so hard the cot creaked. The firelight flickered across her face, pale and damp with fear. Wes didn't move from his chair, but his eyes opened. "You're all right," he said softly. Yet the softness surprised even him. She didn't answer. She pulled the wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes darted to the door, then to him. "You could have left me under that wagon," she whispered. "I know." "Why didn't you?" He rubbed a hand over his scarred jaw. "I ain't built to walk past someone freezing to death." It wasn't the answer she expected. It wasn't the answer he meant either. Days passed. The storm outside became a wall of white. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, and nowhere to place the fear that lived inside both of them. To keep her from slipping back into sickness, Wes began giving her tasks. "Help me keep the fire going," he said one morning. She obeyed, though her hands shook as she stacked the logs. Later, he took her outside to the woodpile. The sky was a pale sheet of gray, and the air burned their lungs. He handed her a small axe. "Split the kindling." She stared at him. "No, I can't do that." "Try." Her first swing missed the log completely. Her second hit the block and bounced off. Heat rose in her face from embarrassment, not effort. Wes didn't laugh. He didn't scold. He simply said, "Again." Frustration pushed her harder than strength did. Finally, her blade struck true and split a log clean in half. She stared at it in disbelief. A small, bright victory. Wes nodded once. "That's the way." Something warm flickered in her chest. Small, quick. It gone in a second, but it had been there. Little by little, the cabin stopped feeling like a trap. It started feeling lived in. She cleaned, she mended blankets, she swept the dirt floor with pine branches she tied together herself. She even made a small broom out of dried grass. One afternoon, Wes walked inside and froze. The cabin smelled clean, lighter, different. He watched her as she folded freshly mended clothes by the fire. Her hair glowed red in the heat of the flames. Now, for a moment, just one moment, she looked like someone who belonged somewhere. The thought startled him. He turned away. But the peace did not last long. That night, when he went out to check the goats, June found a small leather journal tucked under a pile of pelts. She shouldn't have touched it, but loneliness and curiosity pulled her toward it like a tide. Inside were drawings, beautiful drawings. A hawk, a pine cone, a goat with a stubborn expression, and words, simple words, quiet thoughts, not from a brute, but from a man who saw the world with careful eyes. She was sitting by the fire, staring at the sketches, when the door opened. Wes stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. He saw the book in her hands. June flinched, waiting for anger, but Wes only stood there, still as stone, snow melting off his coat in small droplets. His eyes shifted from the book to her. A long, but tired sorrow crossed his face. He took the journal gently from her hands and set it back in its crate. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice broke around the edges. "It's all right." He said it quietly, but his silence after that felt heavier than any storm. The blizzard trapped them together for days, pressing them into a fragile rhythm neither understood. June found herself watching him, how he moved, how he spoke, how he avoided looking at her for too long. She tried to provoke him sometimes. Fear made her restless, made her question everything. "You ever get lonely up here?" she asked one evening as he mended a snowshoe. "No. Most men would be. I ain't most men." The sharpness in his voice made her push harder. "What are you hiding from, Wes? Why'd you bring me here? What do you want?" He looked up then, slowly. His eyes were cold enough to freeze water. "You should rest." "I'm tired of resting," she snapped. I'm tired of you watching me like I'm something broken. What do you want from me?" He stood. The cabin shrank around his size. "I don't want anything from you." "Then why do you look at me like that?" Her voice shook. "Why don't you take what you want like other men?" A muscle in his jaw tightened. He grabbed his coat. "I'm checking the goats. It's the middle of the night." He opened the door. "I know my strength," he said quietly. "Go to sleep." The door closed behind him. And for the first time in her life, a man walked away from her not out of disgust, but out of fear of himself. When he returned hours later, cold and silent, she pretended to sleep. But she didn't. Neither did he. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one growing quietly inside that cabin, one built from fear, longing, shame, and something neither of them dared name yet. And somewhere deep behind the walls of snow, danger began moving toward them. The peace would not last forever. Yet the storm broke, but the danger didn't. Wes sensed it before he saw it. Tracks in the snow, horse tracks, fresh and circling the ridge above the cabin. Someone had been watching. June felt the change in him immediately. His silence tightened. His shoulders stiffened. At night, she woke to see him sitting upright in his chair, hand gripping the handle of his knife, eyes open in the dark. He wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. The fear inside June grew heavy, but another feeling grew beside it: guilt. She had brought her past straight into his life, into his home, into his quiet world of snow and pine. She tried to leave one evening, slipping out the door, believing she was saving him by going. But Wes ran after her, crashing through the snow. "Don't go," he said, breathless. "Don't leave me." She shook her head. I ruin everything I touch. He reached into his pocket and showed her a small birch carving, the letters W and J tied together, and her carving, her secret promise. You left this behind, he said. His voice trembled. This is the only real thing I've had in 8 years. She broke. He held her as she sobbed into his coat. He whispered only one thing. You're mine, not as property, as a life. Spring came, the snow melted. They rebuilt the shed, replanted the garden, and began shaping a world that might finally belong to them. Then danger finally arrived. 3 riders came up the pass, 2 bounty men, and Ricard. June froze at the window. Her breath left her body. That's him. Wes stepped onto the porch, rifle set aside, hands steady. He didn't need a gun to protect her. He was a weapon. Ricard smiled coldly. I've come for what's mine. She ain't yours, Wes said. Ricard smirked. The whole camp had their turn. Did you think she was clean, Cowboy? Inside, June covered her mouth and shook. Wes took 2 steps forward. His voice dropped lower than thunder. Ma, you have 3 seconds to turn around. Ricard laughed. He sent 1 bounty man forward with a whip. The man never reached the porch. Wes charged, grabbed the whip midair, pulled the man toward him, and dropped him with 1 blow, a punch so strong it cracked the frozen ground beneath the bounty hunter's boots. Ricard grabbed his gun. June burst from the cabin with a shovel full of burning embers and threw them into Ricard's face. His horse reared. His scream echoed across the valley. And the remaining bounty man fled. Wes dragged Ricard through the snow. He slammed him against the chopping block, rage shaking his entire body. He was seconds away from killing him. Wes, June cried, grabbing his arm. Don't lose yourself. Don't turn into him. Her touch brought him back. He let Ricard live. Instead, Wes forced him to write a confession. Proof June had been taken, branded, abused, and lied about. Then he forced Ricard to walk out of the mountains on foot. Ricard disappeared forever. Afterward, Wes sat alone on the ridge, trembling. I almost killed him, he whispered. There's a monster in me. June knelt beside him. She cupped his face. You're not a monster. You're a man who chose mercy. He broke, leaning into her hands like a weary child. She stayed. She held him. She reminded him he was human. Summer came. The preacher and his son brought news. Ricard had been arrested. June was free, truly free. And they offered Wes the chance to register the land as his own. The preacher hesitated before asking the final question. A man and woman claiming land together, the law calls them a family. Are you? Wes looked at June. She looked back. Neither spoke, but their hands found each other. They were married by the stream that afternoon. No rings, no fancy clothes. Just 2 people choosing each other fully in the clear summer air. That night, June stood before him in their rebuilt cabin. Husband, she whispered. He froze. The word cracked something open in him. She took his hands and placed them over her heart. I know you were afraid to love me that first night, she said softly. But I'm not glass. I'm iron. And I would rather burn with you than live safe with anyone else. He kissed her, slow, certain, reverent. He lifted her into his arms. 2 broken lives settled into one. Their love was no longer a storm or a fight. It was a home. Years passed. A bigger cabin. A rebuilt barn. Cornfields swaying in the Wyoming sun. Children laughing near the stream. Wes stood behind June on the porch, his arms around her waist, her red hair now streaked with white, his scar now a soft memory. They watched the last light fall behind the Wind River Mountains. Their past still lived in their scars, but love had claimed every one of them. They had built a life from the ruins, a home from silence, a forever from nothing, and they had done it together.